I've got lots of stuff sprawled out across my desk because this is going to be the showing all the work I made for my final year of uni video, although I'm going to split it into two videos. I'm going to show half of the work in this one and the other half in another video because there's so much to show. Plus I want to do a whole dedicated video for my final project, which was... You'll have seen this if you've watched my videos for a while, which was my book hotel. I'm going to do a whole video dedicated to just this project because this project went on for months and months and months. If you're new here, I made a DIY paper craft kit. You make this lovely little book hotel, and this is the packaging for it. I have lots of videos on my channel going through the creation of this project and the creation of all this down here as well. I guess I can also say now I went to Leeds Arts University. I've never actually said it in a video because I didn't really want to say it whilst I was there because it just felt weird telling everyone where I was. That's where I went. I enjoyed it. I studied illustration and I've finished now. I'm just trying to be a freelance illustrator. My aim is to become a freelance children's illustrator. I also run my own shop where I sell my work, and I have obviously all this channel and things, so lots to keep me busy. It's going to be a long and very difficult process, I imagine, to making my dreams come true, but you know, one step at a time. A lot of this work now doesn't really, represent the art I want to make anymore. I know, like, none of this is over a year old, but even, and especially stuff I was doing at the start of this project, a lot of it, well, I guess all of this stuff just doesn't really feel like me. I feel like I've changed a lot since all this stuff I've made, and I much prefer the book hotel project, all the stuff I made in the second half of the year. So there's a right mix of things in here. I guess let's just get going. I'm going to start by going through some pages in this sketchbook. The first project we did, we had to pick a poem, any poem, and make a comic about it. To me, technically the projects were 1 week long, but really it didn't feel like a week because, well, the first day you spent getting the brief, and then like it had to be done a day before the deadline so that it could be seen, so you could like basically submit it. So really you only ended up having kind of 5 days. One of those days is just coming up with an idea and then researching. So really you only ended up having like 3 days to really make art. My drawing style has changed so much since this is one of my more recent sketches. This is how I sketch now. I'm going through a bit of a mouse phase at the moment. Anyway, there you go, there's your comparison of how I draw now and how I drew then. I think I was just trying to really stylise my insects. I was using a lot of reference images but then just stylising them heavily. I ended up focusing in on the ant for my final piece. Also, there's so much, like, I try my hardest to not let the pencil smudge because I spray everything down, but there's no avoiding all the pencil smudges. It's one of my biggest pet peeves, this is. Sometimes I'll just go through and try and clean up the sketchbooks. It's unavoidable. Anyway, so here I am just trying to get really weird and abstract with all the ants. Oh, I think that's a cricket. The poem I was doing was about an ant being squished. I mean, I think it was probably a metaphor for something really meaningful and deep. So I started drawing all these really over-exaggerated squished ants. And then this is some other bits from the poem that I didn't really end up using. This is loads of thumbnails, like loads of tiny little comics that I'm just trying to map out the layout of the comic. I wanted to do something really cool with the panels because obviously when you think of a comic you think square, 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 rectangle. It's like a grid. And I wanted to stay away from that as much as I could because I just like doing interesting things with panels. I'm acting like I do loads of comics. I think I've made 2 comics in my life. This is what I ended up doing for my final. So I'll show you the final piece now. I only had 1 day to do this, so I thought, what's the quickest thing to do that is going to look good? And I decided to just do a really detailed pencil sketch. And then my plan was to maybe add some colour in Photoshop. I really like the sense of movement from the panels. I wanted it to really feel like the foot was coming down with how I placed the panels, kind of like that swooping motion of the step. So you kind of see the step happening, but then the overall picture is like this really horrible squished ant. So I added on some colour as well. This is just a printed out version of it. This is what I submitted. I wanted to keep it really simple, plus I think at this point I was getting close to the deadline, so I was just like, quick, just shove some colour on it, it's done. The next project was about documentation, so we just had to pick any place we wanted and documented it. I had the probably quite boring idea of documenting my street. I just thought it saves me having to travel somewhere. It's right on my doorstep. Also, I used to cover all this up because I didn't want people to know where I live, but I don't live there anymore, so I guess it doesn't matter. This is where I lived at uni. So this is just me doing some really, really loose, very loose, extremely loose drawings of my street. Just trying to because obviously the projects were so quick, I would just try and fill up as many pages as I could, as quick as I could. So the drawings, they weren't the most time consuming things to do. This was my street. My house was around, probably that little thing there. This was using Google Maps. I was doing the bird's eye views of all the houses. This was a little drawing of the end bit of my street, really scribbly. And you know what, that's all the stuff in this sketchbook for this project, because I did a lot on loose sheets. I made this little book very quickly again, not good sketches, and I just really wanted to quickly get down all the knowledge I had of the street, which was very, very limited, because obviously I don't really live there that long, and when I came home any opportunity I could get, to be honest, so I wasn't there a massive amount. I knew that at number 3 there was always this man who was looking out of his window whenever you walked past. These numbers I don't really think are that accurate either. I just kind of guessed what number house they were. Number 34, I'm pretty sure the woman with the dog who does the neighbourhood watch business lives there. House number 8 and house number 9 were flirting because they would stick pictures on their windows facing each other. House number 20 did a lot of gardening. There's always garden stuff outside. House number 21, he did not like it when people blocked his drive. There's traffic cone outside. House number 14, there was always a family playing cricket. 22, someone would always play the drums, which honestly was a bit annoying. Anyway, that was my very quick summary of the street I lived on. I'm gonna have to show this in another shot because it's too big to fit on screen right now. I did a quick painting from out of my window, trying to stay very, very loose and gestural, is that the right word? I think this turned out really cute. I did a big sketch. I kind of wanted to merge the bird's eye view perspective with just looking at the houses from the front, so it would just be this really weird wonky perspective, and I wanted to do a big map of my street and paint every single house. This was very ambitious considering I had 2 days to do it, and I remember just painting frantically non-stop for hours to get the final thing done. And then this is the final thing. Obviously I'll show you a better view of it. It's not the most accurate thing. It started off pretty accurate, and then the further I went along, the more because I was using Google Maps as like my reference, so I was like kind of going along Google Maps and painting each house as I saw it. I remember getting halfway and just thinking I've completely mixed up these houses. Again, I did this on newsprint. Don't really know why. I think at the time I wanted it to have like an old shabby rustic map feel to it, and I thought, I'll just do it on newsprint. Looking back on it now, I would prefer if this was on like a nice sheet of paper because it's so crinkly. So that was the documentation brief. I should also mention, alongside all of this work, we would also be updating our Google Slides, which is how everyone, like the teachers, would see your work through the Google Slides. So on there, as well as showing all the work you've made, you would also put on every little bit of research that you did and all the bits of writing and all your reflections on all the work you've made. I'll do a quick skim through right now of what those slides look like because they would take up a lot of time. There's also work that I no longer have, which are only on the slides, so there might be a few times where I pop them up on screen, so if that does pop up, you know what it is. So yeah, we just document everything on those slides, and they would get very, very long and they would be very time consuming to put together. Project number 3 was an editorial brief, which is illustrations for magazines that go alongside articles. There was a couple of articles to choose from. The one I chose was about making public spaces, kind of like parks, more accessible for people with disabilities, and also seeing nature within your own house. So there's a mix of drawings here. So there's a lot of house related drawings and then more like naturey, park inspired drawings, and also just drawing things that were referenced in the article. I mean, I can't remember what the article said, but I probably mentioned a mouse and a bird. Just trying to get out as many ideas as I possibly could on all these pages, wanting to do something about how nature is like locked away, to get across how it's not accessible, but then also the other side of the article, which was more the positive side, which was like having nature around you in your own house. These are more finished sketches that I did, which could have been like more finalised ideas. I was stuck between this one, which I did some more thumbnail sketches for, and this idea. More sketches for that idea, and then ultimately I decided to go for this idea here, and I did a media test. This is actually, I think, the only bit of collage, is it? There might be a little tiny bit more later on. This will be the only bit of collage that you'll see in this video. If you know me, you know I collage like mad now, but I was trying to stay away from collage for this half of the year because I just wanted to do something a bit different. But for this project I did stick with collage, but I was doing it a lot more loose and abstract than I usually do. So this was my media test, and then I did the final piece. And I'd say this is probably my least favourite project, or my least favourite outcome that I did. I think, you know, given the time limit that I had, I think it's a pretty cool piece of art, but it's just not really what I want my art to look like. I think it gets the message across though, hopefully showing how there's all these, you know, lovely parks, but for some people, they might as well be on top of these stilts with hundreds and hundreds of stairs to get to them because they're just not accessible. Okay, moving on to the final 1 week long project, and this one was my favourite. It was all about pattern and Christmas. You could have picked, there was a few different, it was like Valentine's Day and Halloween that you could have done, but obviously I'm going to pick Christmas because I'm obsessed with it. We just had to make a repeat pattern around the theme of Christmas, and it also had to be the theme of self-love, although I didn't really do that bit, but I managed to kind of weave it in. Oh, these are really simple sketches because I was planning on carving them into rubbers, and that's what you'll see here. So I carved these into rubbers. This was part of we did this all in lesson, and then I did these repeat patterns on some separate sheets. I don't have them anymore, so I'll have to put up my slides to show you. I started to try and figure out what I wanted my final piece to be. I saw these really cute felted mice ornaments, like Christmas tree ornaments, on Pinterest, and I was instantly inspired, and I was like, I need to do something with mice. So I did a few different sketches here. I like the bird one, actually, it's quite cute. And then I drew all these mice in different Christmassy scenarios. And then I went onto Photoshop. Well, I took pictures of them and I cropped them all to have them all as individual little things I could move around. And then on Photoshop, there's a tool you can use to make repeat patterns. So I kind of placed everything around, and then you can easily make repeat patterns. So I'll show you them as well on screen because I don't have them anymore. So I was doing all these test layouts of what the pattern could look like. And then eventually I settled on this as my final idea. Oh, I also did, well, I kind of had two final ideas. I had the much simpler one, and then I had another one which was kind of like inspired by a patchwork quilt, and with all these filled in squares with all these different mice in different scenarios. But for the time I had, which was one day, and I thought there's no way I'm getting that painted in one day, so I went for the simpler one. And then I spent the whole next day painting these mice. I love these guys, and there's some cookies as well down here. I think they're so cute. So I painted them. That took me a few hours, and then I cut them up, brought them into Photoshop, cut around all of them and placed them into a pattern. I want to actually show you for some comparisons how my mice have changed. This is how I draw my mice now. I think they're a lot more loose and stylised and have a lot more personality compared to So like these guys, they're quite stiff. I mean, it just depends on personal preference, I suppose, but at the moment I much prefer these guys. Also the gingham in the ears is too cute, but there you go, that's like how I've developed over the course of half a year, I think, around that time. I also tried wrapping up a present, but it had to be really small because I could only wrap something with an A3 sheet of paper because I couldn't print bigger than that. The next project that we did was the much longer one. This was free, I think it might have been free, probably 4 weeks, and you could do anything. So I decided to base my project around the story of Thumbelina. I knew I wanted to do something which involved things that had been shrunk down into nature, and Thumbelina was just like the perfect story for that. This project was just make as much things as you can, and just there wasn't really a final piece. The final piece was just kind of like the body of work that you made at the end. So this project gave you a lot of freedom to just play without the stress of kind of end results. So I really took that and I ran with it, and I ended up making so many different things for this project. So I started off like I do every project, by just doing some initial sketches, just taking little scenes from the stories and illustrating them. Oh, as well as being inspired by Thumbelina, I was also heavily inspired by Scandinavian tapestries. I'll put up some of my research slides now so you know what I'm going on about. Lots of flower patterns, and they're very stylized flowers. We're using a lot of geometric shapes and symmetry, directly inspired by the flowers on the tapestries here, and then I was trying to see how I could include them into the story of Thumbelina, trying to include it onto her dress and into the characters. I loved this sketch of this mole. I ended up doing a painting of him actually. I think you might have seen him at the start. So I'm still just playing around with ideas, not really knowing where I'm going, but just having fun sketching. A little bit of paint here. And then I wanted to give myself more of a focus and just do something completely different, because I was kind of sick of doing flat things and just drawing or painting. I wanted to make something, so I decided to do something I've never done before and make some clay pots. So then I spent the next week or so, couple of weeks, designing, making and painting a collection of pots, all inspired by Thumbelina. I'll just show you all the sketchbook now, and then I'll show you all the separate loose things after. This was me starting to do, basically because I was doing so many small things, I was starting to get the itch to do something more time consuming and finished, and I thought I'd do a really detailed painting of the frog character, where the Thumbelina first meets the frog. It's quite a creepy scene really. So I just wanted to do something that shows I can do something dark and creepy and moody, because all my work is so nice and bright and joyful and colourful. I wanted to just show, hey, look, I can do moody stuff if I want to. This was the more detailed sketch of it, and then I'll get to showing you the actual painting in a second. I'll just get to the end of this section of the sketchbook. This is more planning out the paintings that I was going to put on the pots that I made. Just planning out the design for my pots, and then this is something different now. So that's all the sketchbook stuff. Now I'll show you all the loose things I had. I'll start by showing you the finished piece that I did for this. So I did this little sketch here, and then I did a much more detailed sketch, a much bigger one, because when you scale things up you realise there's gaps that need filling. So I did a much more detailed sketch, and then I did the final painting. I did this in gouache. It took me a long time. It's very detailed. I'll show you a digital version of it because it looks better. I think the camera always struggles to pick this up for some reason. And as you can see, I was trying to add in all the Scandinavian tapestry flowers all over, but making them really spiky to make them look kind of dangerous, to add with like the dark theme of it all. Yeah, I think it's really cool. I like the colour palette. I have lots of these square sheets of paper all with different things on. I remember we did these in lesson. They just gave us these little squares, and I was like, right, you've got all day, fill as many of these squares as possible. They're all inspired by Scandinavian tapestry with like the story of Thumbelina weaved in where I could put it basically. So some of them are a bit rubbish, but I think some of them are quite cool. Most of these were done using acrylic paint. This is acrylic paint, and then this is collage. And then I also just use felt tip pens as well. Did a few bits and bobs in this, really not many. I think this is all the pages I did. I made a bunch of prints of this bird that I made. I can't remember what the technique was that I was using, but I'll show it on my slides what the original thing looked like. And I made all these prints from it. And I did loads, all in different colours, all slightly different, like ripped paper on top of them. Oh, there's quite a nice one of the bird. So I made like an animation with them all. So it kind of looks like the birds flying through like a stormy sky and there's like lightning going off. I also did a bunch of different prints. Some of them are very quick and loose and rubbish. I think some of them are quite cool. You can really tell with this project how I was just trying a little bit of everything and just trying to make as much work as I possibly could in the time. I really like the way this turned out. Did this pretty long one of Thumbelina and the bird as he like flies away. This is a mix of printing and then these bits are cut out, collaged on top. This is my favourite of the prints. Can't remember what this technique is called, but basically you roll out a bunch of ink and then you can see on the back, you basically draw the design on the back and then all the ink transfers to the front. I did this huge oil pastel piece, all inspired by the Scandinavian tapestries that I was looking at, and then I ended up using this a lot for the project that you'll see just after this. Oh, I guess there was kind of 6 projects then, but the next project is all about showing the work from this project. I like this piece, but I think the colours are they're just a little bit bold and in your face, a bit too saturated for my taste. So I ended up doing a bit of Photoshop tweaking and I made this. I'll pop my slides up now actually. I made it all one colour. Well, first of all I tweaked the composition of it and kind of made it into a repeat pattern, and I changed the colours and printed it out on pink paper and ended up liking it a lot more once I did that. And I guess the last thing I have to show you from this project was all the clay pots I made. Don't even remember me showing you all those sketches that I did for these. I don't know where a lot of them are. This is all I can find. I know they're in my room somewhere, but I can't bother finding them, and I have pictures of them and I have videos of them. So I'll just pop all that up on screen whilst I talk to you about them. I made 2 tiny little Thumbelinas. One could hang on the edge of the mug and another one was like lying down and you could put her on this little leaf that I made, kind of floating in the bowl. These were all inspired by things that were mentioned in the story. So the bowl, well, not all of them, but some of them. So like the plate that I made was inspired by a bit in the story where, well, Thumbelina is using a plate as a swimming pool. So I thought I would make that actual plate, and in the story it says it's surrounded by a wreath of flowers. So I did those twisty vines around it. And then I made a little Thumbelina that floats on top on a little leaf. I'll show you some process pictures as well. I kind of, looking back at these pictures, I much prefer all these pieces when they were plain white. I think, especially the mug, I think I painted them too much. Like if I was to go back and paint these now, I'd make them a lot simpler. This is like the only one that I actually use. I keep this on my desk and my rubber sits in it and my tape. I think this one's really cute. So that's kind of everything I made for this project. The final project, which was kind of like an extension of the project I've just shown you, it was basically a project documenting all the work we'd made. So we didn't have to make any new work for it. We just had to figure out a nice way to take all the work that we've just made and just select all the best bits and show that off in a nice book. And also alongside all this work that I've been showing you, we was doing a lot of written work. The finished book for this project had to include all visuals from this project as well as little snippets from the piece of writing that we'd done. To start this project, I was just scanning a bunch of my work and chopping out my favourite bits and just sticking them on the page for a bit of fun. I ended up really enjoying the way this looked, and this inspired basically the finished piece. I wanted to go for this kind of scrapbooky where I would really zoom into just tiny little bits of sketches and use them as to make new patterns. Because basically my whole project was about making patterns, although Thumbelina was the inspiration. It was mainly about how can I use Thumbelina to make some interesting patterns. This is just me cutting up all the bits of art that I'd been making and figuring out just interesting ways to display them all alongside each other. Oh, this is not related to any of that. This was from when I was painting my pots to figure out what it would look like. It's not really in order, this book. I moved on to planning out the final book. I really wanted to decorate it and make it something really pretty and unique. So here was me planning out the book, planning out the pages, how I was going to arrange everything. All this stuff. I think by this point uni has finished and this is all just random sketches that I was doing. This was the first mock book that I made. I was using the pattern that I'd made from that big oil pastel piece as kind of the outer cover. That worked really well, and I wanted to do some cool closure twisty thing. Like I said, this is just a mock, so it's messy and bad. Originally I was thinking of doing 2 books. Maybe I had a book for all the writing bits that I wanted to include and then a book for just the visuals. And that just wasn't going to work. It was really disjointed, so I thought scrap that. As fun as it would be to have kind of 2 books, a big book and a little book, it just makes more sense to have them together on the same page. So that was mock number 1, and then I made this. I can't quite remember what order I made them in, but this might have been next. Then I made this one, which was much closer to what I wanted. This project was really tough for me actually, because it required kind of like I needed to put a little bit of my graphic design hat on, which obviously I don't do. I'm an illustrator, so figuring out how to lay stuff out within a book was quite tricky. And I was also like messing around with text, like I don't really do that very often, so figuring out how to get text to look good alongside the image I really struggled with, and I think you can tell on the final piece. I think some pages turned out cute, but there were others that just look a bit disjointed. Another book that I made. I think this might be one of my favourites actually. I think I really like how small and cute it is, and I wish I would have made the final piece this small, because I wanted it to be small like Thumbelina. I mean, the final piece still is quite small, but I wish I'd made it smaller. I was also making a lot of patterns with the drawings I'd done. I'll show you it on my slides after this, but yeah, I was chopping up my drawings and rearranging them and flipping them to make cool patterns. I did make another book. It was this really tiny, even smaller than this, little accordion book, and I don't know where it's gone, which is a real shame because that was one of my favourites. I think I do have a video of it somewhere. I might be able to find it and put it on screen. Before I show you the final piece, I'll quickly flick through my slides so you can see a bit of the design process. I just spent so many hours on Photoshop just moving things around, just trying to figure out the best way to arrange things. I just remember getting really frustrated because I just couldn't figure it out. It's like I couldn't get the things to look nice together. I got there eventually, although I think I could have, it still could be better. But this is the final piece. I made these little clay bits because I thought it'd be nice to do a little nod towards all the clay pieces I've been making for this project. Also like how I managed to get it kind of almost nearly line up perfectly so it carries on. I also made this little bit out of clay. So this is just a folder really. You can take the book out or you can flick through it with it still in the folder. but yes, this just is a case holding it. And then on the inside, this is the frog painting that I did. I just thought I'd include a bigger kind of poster version of it. And then I painted these extra guys to go inside it as well. Just I thought they look cute. It's a little bit wonky. I wish I had printed out more copies of everything so I could try again, because when I sewed the book together everything went a little bit skew with, but oh well. Also, like, in a perfect world you wouldn't be able to see the inside pages from the outside of the book. Like, that would be a perfectly, like, obviously a book's a straight line. You don't see the pages on the inside. Really, that needs to be cut off. But I couldn't cut that off because there are full pages that fold out, so it would have messed that up. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. An Exploration of Pattern and Story by Emily Schofield. There are so many spelling mistakes in this book. I am very rubbish at spelling. All these bits of writing are just little sentences that I've pulled from the much bigger piece of writing that we had to do. And yeah, so this book is just filled with kind of the highlights of the project, as well as extra things that I'd made where I'd taken little sketches and I'd played with it on Photoshop and arranged it to make something different. Some of it is just printed, but then I also collaged, like, I don't know if you can tell, but that's stuck on top. Yeah, so there are a few bits in the book where I've collaged into it because I wanted it to have like a scrapbooky sort of feel. Also, on reflection, I probably should have printed it on much thinner paper. These pages are way too thick, which is why I struggled to sew it together and it's a little bit messy. So that was I think it was called a research document. But basically that was my book summarising the whole project that I did. There you go, that is everything I made in the first half of my final year of illustration. I don't know when I'll post the second half, the book hotel video. I will link in the description all the videos I can find which have included me making any of the work that I've shown in this video. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video and I'll see you soon. Bye!